Hey, Mr. Johnston here. In this video, I'm going to explain the second half of your weekly packet, and I'm going to share my screen so we can do that right here. Of course, at any point, feel free to pause the video so you can make sense of what I'm sharing, so you can add notes, so you can do what you need to do. So the short version, you've already seen this in the first video. This document this week explains human population growth and its connection to Earth's systems and the use of natural resources. So at the beginning, we look at increases in global population. We have this simple graph showing that global population, it is increasing. You answered some questions about it. And then we get a little more complicated with the next graphs. Here we have a graph showing the relationship, or excuse me, the breakdown of country populations based on their young population below 16 and their older population above 65. Some things to remember here. The younger population in comparison to older groups are probably going to live longer and are more likely to have children. Once people are 65 and older, they don't have as much of a lifespan. They've lived 65 or more years. And at that point, they are not having new babies. So if we keep that in mind, countries that have a larger population of youth will likely see growth in population. They will likely see at least sustained population. So to answer your questions, number one, you should write down each of the countries, A, B, C, and D. And you need to describe in the next 10 and the next 20 years, using the youth and elderly breakdown, do you expect the population of country A to grow, stay the same, or decrease? You should describe that for each of the four countries. Country A, population will increase, stay the same, or decrease. B, will increase, decrease, stay the same, as well as D and C. After you describe future population changes, it is in question 2, you will describe why you expect those changes. So for example, you could say in country A, with an enormous population of young people that will soon be childbearing age, you expect the population to increase because with more young people, you see expansions, you see growth, you see rises in the population. You could describe the exact opposite for a country like D that has more old people than young people. With more old people, we expect to lose them over time as older folks pass away. And with fewer young people to replenish the population, growth may be slower, or it actually may be a shrinking population. Here we have a paragraph describing the importance of youth. Essentially, populations grow. The way we measure that is by people arriving in a new place or being born will increase the population. People dying or leaving a place will decrease the population. As we continue to our third graph describing human population, we get more complex. Here we're measuring specifically age structure in 3 different countries. First, let's look at our countries. We're talking about an area with rapid population growth, Kenya, an area with slow population growth, the United States, and an area with negative growth, or in other words, an area where the population is shrinking. That's Germany. As we continue, there are lots of details here. We can see that each of these 3 countries is split between blue and orange, blue representing the gender of folks that identify as male, orange folks that identify as female. And you can see these are mostly balanced throughout the charts, mostly even between male and female. I would call your attention to the 80+ post-reproductive group in the US and Germany. We can see that a slightly larger percentage of those folks are female, showing that longer female life expectancy. We've got our 3 countries. We've got 2 genders represented. And lastly, I want to call your attention to these bands, these colored sections of post-reproductive, reproductive, and pre-reproductive. What this means is we have divided the population into age groups based on whether or not these ages are able to have children. Pre-reproductive would mean folks that are not yet able to have children, and that's marked as 0 to 19 years of age here. Now, we know that sometimes teenagers can create a pregnancy, but for the sake of this graph, we're defining them as pre-reproductive or before reproductive years. 20 to 44 is how we're defining reproductive years, or in other words, folks that are able to have children, that are able to create a pregnancy. Again, some people after the age of 44, some people before the age of 20 can reproduce, but in this chart, we're defining reproductive years as 20 to 44. 45 upward, we're defining as post-reproductive, post meaning after the period of reproduction. So using this information, we're going to answer 3 questions. How would you describe Kenya's growth? Let's look at number 1. Here in Kenya's growth, we can see that with a larger population at the bottom, we can see there are more young people. With more young people, more pre-reproductive folks, that shows us that in the future, when these folks grow up and join the reproductive area, that is a large population that can create new pregnancies, can build the population. Because of that increase, we call Kenya a rapid growth country. You could describe Kenya's growth of population as rapid. Number 2, why does a chart like Germany show negative growth, the exact opposite of the Kenya situation? Here, I again encourage you to look at the pre-reproductive and the younger age groups. With fewer young people who will one day be reproductive, there are fewer people to have pregnancies and expand the population. Because of this, Germany is experiencing negative growth. Their population is shrinking. More people are dying or moving away than they are immigrating to the country or being born there. Finally, what can you determine about population growth rates from observing the top halves of these 3 charts? Follow along with me. This part is complicated. When we look at the top half of this chart, I'm going to crop just for the visual. Imagine we only see this information, only the post-reproductive section. If we are only given this information, we may be inclined to think that Germany has the largest population, followed by the US, followed by Kenya, when in actuality, we know that that is not the case. Now, if we only have the top part of this graph, we will be thinking that there is similarity between these countries and that Germany is actually the largest. The key idea here, the most important information, is without the youth, without the younger populations, we cannot predict the future of the population. So without reproductive and without pre-reproductive data, let me repeat, we are unable to predict the future. So something you may want to write down for number 3 would be, I'm going to put this in bold so you see it. Without seeing the youth, we cannot predict future population growth. We cannot predict the future of the population without seeing the youngest generations. That is key. The younger populations are necessary to make future predictions about population growth. I'm going to stop right there. And if you have questions, check with your neighbor, reread the directions, rewatch this video, or of course, if you're in class, raise your hand and check with your teacher. I'm excited to see what you come up with. And as always, please be safe and be kind. I will see you later.